Hello there. Okay, it's time for Frankenstein Chapter 7 review. This is a big one. I hope you guys have already read it. I don't want to be the spoiler, so here we go. Remember at the end of Chapter 6, Victor and Henry Clerval have been Henry was helping Victor get over his madness. They've been taking classes together, language classes, nothing science related. And the last paragraph of chapter 6, we return to our college on a Sunday afternoon. Everything is great, bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. Woohoo, it's a great day. So on his return, he finds the following letter from his father. This is Victor's letter. Remember, he was waiting for a date to be selected so he could go home, catch a ride, get a carriage, all this stuff. Here's the letter. My dear Victor, you have probably waited impatiently for a letter to fix the date of your return. And he goes on for another paragraph, but I didn't want to tell you any bad news because that would be terrible. But I didn't want you to arrive here and see that we were all sad and crying. And it's like, what is going on? He says, I know even now your eyes are skimming over the page to seek the words which are to convey to you the horrible tidings. Drumroll, please. William is dead. That sweet child, yes, Victor's youngest brother, the little kid who was like 5 or 6 or 7, yeah. 5-year-old child, very, very young, and he's dead. That sweet child, Victor, he is murdered. So the rest of the letter, he says, I will relate the circumstances of the transaction. He does it kind of emotionless. It's like, let me just tell you what happened so you'll know when you get here and I don't have to say it again. So he says, last Thursday, May 7th, I, my niece, all of us, your brothers, we were out walking, went to Plainpalais. The evening was warm and serene. We walked farther than usual. The boys are actually kind of playing, maybe hide and seek. That's what it sounds like. Then Ernest comes back and says, I haven't seen William in a while. I can't find him. So everybody goes looking for him, can't find him. Elizabeth says, hey, maybe he returned to the house. So they go home. He's not there. They return again with torches. Remember, they don't have flashlights. It's just like a stick with fire on it. Because I couldn't rest thinking that the sweet boy would be out in the forest alone at night. So he says, about 5 in the morning, I discovered my lovely boy, and he was dead. The print of the murderer's finger was on his neck, so it looked like he'd been strangled. We brought him home, and the biggest change is Elizabeth. She says she needs to see the dead body. And so she runs in and says, oh God, I have murdered my darling child. So the reader is like, what is going on? Did she do it? But she fainted, so then she couldn't say anything more, was restored with extreme difficulty, which means she had a hard time coming to and being sensible. And when she did, it says when she again lived, it doesn't mean she was dead. It just means that she lost consciousness. And then when she did wake up, it was only to weep and sigh. So she has this heavy burden. Then she relates why she thinks what she thinks. William had teased her to let him wear a very valuable miniature that she possessed of your mother. So if you think of like a locket or an image, a small little painting, they don't have like photographs. This is 200 years ago. So a little miniature of Carolyn Beaufort. And William had asked for it. So Elizabeth had put it on his neck, so he was wearing it during the game of hide and seek. The picture was gone, the necklace was gone, and so everybody says that must have been the temptation which urged the murderer to the deed. We have no trace of him at the present, although we have been looking. Okay, so this is all in the letter. Please come home soon so that you can console Elizabeth. He also says, and this is a very important message, from his father, come, Victor, not brooding thoughts of vengeance against the assassin, but with feelings of peace and gentleness that will heal instead of festering the wounds of our minds. Enter the house of mourning, my friend, but with kindness and affection for those who love you, and not with hatred for your enemies. This is Mary Shelley 200 years ago. If you think of anything that has happened recently that rings a bell of forgiving a killer, that is why Frankenstein is still relevant today. It's a difficult task. Even when I talk to everybody in class, it's like, could you forgive someone who had killed someone dear to you? And I mean, I know since I'm a Christian, that is part of the Christian message. And remember, this is a Christian society, and his dad is like trying to live this message. Very, very important. Victor, it's already happened. You can't do anything to change it. So come and be peaceful, because we're suffering enough with the death, and we will kind of want to get through it. So very important message from Alphonse Frankenstein. So remember, this is only in a letter that Victor just received, and Henry is standing there with him. Henry sees his countenance change, and so he says, what are you going to do? He says, I'm going to go back to Geneva right now. So he orders the horses. Henry stays behind in Ingolstadt. He's not going to go with him because you can tell at the end of a couple of paragraphs later, I hurried into a cabriolet and bade farewell to my friend. My journey was very melancholy. So of course he's sad. And then he spends a while. So it's a couple of days. He says, I passed 2 days at Lausanne, Switzerland, in this painful state of mind. I contemplated the lake. It gets all into that kind of romanticism, but not necessarily as healing. It's just he's trying to heal, but obviously nothing is going to happen. I wept like a child. So he gets closer to home, but this is important. Now, a couple paragraphs later, he says, it was completely dark when I arrived in the environs of Geneva. The gates of the town were already shut, and I was obliged to pass the night at Secheron, a village at the distance of half a league from the city. So, what I was trying to relate to the students was that in Europe, especially 200 years ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, if you had a small city town, you often had a levee, a berm, a structure of some sort so that you could put a wall around your city. The most secure cities had walls, and it would just be to prevent invasions and raiders and looters from coming in and stealing things that were valuable. So Geneva had a wall, and so then the gates are closed. And when the gates are closed, nobody's coming in. So when Victor arrives, he cannot get in to see his family, so he has to go somewhere else. When it says half a league, I had to look that up because I don't know how far that is, but it was 1.5 miles. So he has to, obliged to pass the night, he needs to go walking another 1.5 miles in the dark to pass the night at another village so that he can get some sleep somewhere. So while he's walking through the dark in the night, it's storming. It says, I walked on, although the darkness and storm increased every minute, and the thunder burst with a terrific crash over my head. Then Mary Shelley spends a couple of paragraphs describing the storm and the mountains and how it's kind of, it's like an attempt at renewing him and getting Victor back to his home. Well, while I watched the tempest so beautiful yet terrific, I wandered on with a hasty step. This noble war in the sky elevated my spirits. It's again the nature kind of lifting him out of his depression. I clasped my hands, and he's kind of mourning, William, dear angel. As I said these words, pay attention here, I perceived in the gloom a figure which stole from behind a clump of trees near me. I stood fixed, gazing intently. I could not be mistaken. A flash of lightning illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me, its gigantic stature. You should be understanding what I'm saying right now, and the deformity of its aspect, more hideous than belongs to humanity, instantly informed me that it was the wretch, the filthy demon to whom I had given life. It's the creature. He's out there wandering in his hometown after traveling for days, and it's the creature. You probably and hopefully were wondering, what the heck? Where was the creature? It had been like a year and a half since he had made it. Where's the creature been? I was wondering the first time I read it. I'm like, where did he go? So, apparently he went near Geneva, which was Victor's hometown. Dun, 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 foreshadowing. What did he there? Could he be, I shuddered at the conception, the murderer of my brother? What do you think? No sooner did that idea cross my imagination than I became convinced of its truth. So he knows what is going on here. It's like, how did you figure this out? He doesn't know any answers because he bailed out on his own creation. He had this God complex. He created this being, and then he abandoned it. So yeah, he is going to have some questions in times ahead. So the figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. And then this whole paragraph is super important. You're going to want to mark this page so that you can get back to it and quote from it in any essay that you will have to write. He was the murderer. I could not doubt it. So then he says, I thought of pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for in another flash discovered him, that means I saw him, to me, hanging among the rocks of the nearly perpendicular ascent of Mount Salève, a hill that bound Plain Palais on the south. He soon reached the summit and disappeared. In the storm, in the lights, in the flashes of lightning, he sees the creature ascend or scale the side of a mountain, just bounding up the side with no trouble, and then he gets to the top and disappears. So where's the creature? Well, apparently he's living in the mountains. So he says 2 years had now nearly elapsed since the night on which he first received life. Was this his first crime? Well, we don't know yet, so we'll have to figure that out. Alas, I turned. So really important here. He says, no one can conceive the anguish which I suffered during the remainder of the night. Oh, you're feeling pretty bad, are you? Well, you abandoned him, so you should. Which I spent cold and wet in the open air. So he never makes it to the town to sleep. He's not getting any sleep. He's thinking about the fact that he had created this creature. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind, and I endowed with the will and power to effect purposes of horror, such as the deed which he had now done. Like, I did this, and now he's finally thinking about the consequences of his actions. So this is a really, really important paragraph. Then, in the next paragraph, day dawned, and I directed my steps towards the town. The gates are open. He heads on home, and he says, my first thought was to discover what I knew. My first thought is to tell everybody that I saw and tell them what I know. And this is really important, you guys. But I paused when I reflected on the story that I had to tell. A being whom I myself had formed, I gave him life, had met me at midnight among the precipices of an inaccessible mountain. Doesn't that sound crazy? I made a person. So it's this kind of, no one's going to believe me. They're going to think I'm crazy. He knows that, he says, I remembered also the nervous fever with which I had been seized just at the time that I dated my creation would give an air of delirium to a tale otherwise utterly improbable. No one's going to believe me. If they do, they're going to think I'm crazy. So it's a super narcissistic view. It's like, no, I need to be seen as good. I need to be seen as smart, not a crazy person. So I well knew that if any other had communicated such a relation to me, I would think that they're crazy. So he says, I resolved to remain silent. He knows what's going on, and he says, I'm not going to tell anybody. Super important. Definitely flag that page. So he goes home in the next paragraph. He's crying, and he's talking with his older brother, his younger brother, but the older of the two younger ones, Ernest. And he says, oh gosh, yeah, you have to console Elizabeth. She's so sad. the murderer has been discovered. And Victor's like, has he really? Because no, probably he's not, because, he just saw him climb the mountain. So he says, the murderer discovered? Good God, how can that be? Who could attempt to pursue him? He's asking about, like, who could even go up the side of a mountain? And he says, it is impossible. One might as well try to overtake the winds or confine a mountain stream with a straw. I saw him too. He was free last night. Victor's talking about the creature. But no one else knows what Victor's talking about. He says, I do not know what you mean, replied his brother. But to us, the discovery completes our misery. No one would believe it. Indeed, who would credit that Justine Moritz, who was so wonderful, could be capable of such a crime? What? This is why I spent so much time talking about Justine Moritz in chapter 6. You have to understand who she is. She was taken in by the Frankensteins. Her mother hated her. Her father loved her, but her mother hated her, treated her so badly. The Frankensteins took her in. She's like another adopted daughter to the Frankensteins. She's a young woman. Elizabeth loves her like a sister, and now she's accused of the crime. What? Justine Moritz, poor girl, is she the accused? But it is wrongfully. Of course Victor would say that because he knows who the killer is. And then Ernest is like, yeah, nobody believed it. But circumstantial evidence has come out that forced conviction upon us. Now, in the letter, Elizabeth had related to everybody, and this is in the letter at the beginning of chapter 7. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I'm going to talk about it now. If you go back to the letter, Elizabeth had said she had put a necklace around William's neck the night that they played hide and seek. And so guess where that necklace was found? Well, it was found in the pocket of Justine's apron. So everybody said, okay, well, that's what you call circumstantial. The circumstance is that the necklace is there. That doesn't necessarily mean that Justine is the killer. It just means that everybody believes she's the killer because Elizabeth had said it was the necklace that was the draw for the killer. And then, of course, poor William was strangled. The print of the murderer was on his throat. So Justine, at the time of the murder, Justine had taken ill and been confined to bed for several days. One of the servants, just some other random person, happened to examine the apparel she had worn on the night of the murder and discovered in the pocket the picture of my mother, which had been judged to be the temptation of the murderer. The servant instantly showed it to one of the other servants, who, without saying anything to the family, went straight to the magistrate, which is like the sheriff or the police. They apprehend Justine without talking with anyone and accuse her of the crime. So now she is the accused. And it says, on being charged with the fact that she's the murderer, the poor girl confirmed the suspicion by being confused. By her extreme confusion of manner. Yes, one might be confused if one is accused of a crime, and she is a young girl. So Victor in the next paragraph says, you are all mistaken. I know the murderer. Justine, poor good Justine, is innocent. Okay, this is as close as he's getting right now to saying who the real murderer is. At that instant, my father entered, and Victor says, good God, Papa, Ernest says this. Good God, Papa, Victor says that he knows who was the murderer of poor William. And then his father says, we do also, unfortunately. For indeed, I had rather been forever ignorant than have discovered so much depravity and ingratitude in one I valued so highly. Yeah, we know who the murderer is. It's Justine. And I thought that she was going to be grateful, but I never realized that she was going to turn on us like this. And Victor says, my dear father, you are mistaken. Justine is innocent. He's kind of trying to say she's innocent, like, I know, but he doesn't reveal his secret. He does not reveal his secret. That's really important. If she is, God forbid that she should suffer as guilty, she is to be tried today. Well, you know how today's trials will drag on for years and years? Not so 200 years ago. They have that day. So then he says, well, I sincerely hope that she will be acquitted. That means the charges would be dropped. She would be not necessarily found innocent or guilty. It just means the charges go away. And so then at the end, in that same paragraph that this speech calmed me is how it starts. I was firmly convinced in my own mind that Justine was guiltless of this murder as well as every other human. And he's like, oh, it's just circumstantial evidence. Who's going to find her guilty? But then in the next sentence, he says, my tale was not one to announce publicly. Its astounding horror would be looked upon as madness by the vulgar. Again, he goes back to, but me. I need to make sure that nobody thinks I'm crazy, so I'm not going to say anything. Did anyone indeed exist except I, the creator, who would believe? Oh my gosh. So he does not say anything. Then he talks about Elizabeth and how she fills me, or she says, your arrival fills me with hope. Maybe that you're here. Justine will be innocent. If she's condemned, I never shall know joy more. Well, yeah, but all he says is, she is innocent, my Elizabeth, and that shall be proved. Fear nothing, but let your spirits be cheered by the assurance of her acquittal. So Victor seems to feel confident in her acquittal, but he has not said anything. So that's how it ends. Sorry it took so long, but there's just a lot in this chapter. So we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.